LeakYou.com on YouTube.
Haven't you ever heard of a killer? I drop bombs like Hiroshima.
A fifth former sheriff's deputy in Mississippi has been sentenced for his part in torturing two black men last year. 53-year-old Brett McAlpin was sentenced to more than 27 years in federal prison. The final former officer, Joshua Hartfield, who worked for a different police department, is also being sentenced today. Last August, the men admitted to breaking into a home and using stun guns, a sex toy, and other objects to torture the men. So far, a federal judge has given sentences ranging from 17.5 to 40 years. For more, let's bring in New York Law School professor Kirk Burkhalter. He's also the director of the school's 21st Century Policing Project. Kirk, all six former deputies are at the scene. They played a part in torturing these two men. I was in the courtroom yesterday, and the level of emotion these men still feel and their relatives is immeasurable. Why do you see this varying degrees of sentencing when it comes to some getting 17.5 years and one man getting 40 years?
So the sentencing is varied by the degree of culpability, meaning what particular acts that one person committed. So the reason why they're all receiving heavy sentences is because they all worked in together in some form of conspiracy. However, who actually pulled the trigger, for instance, of the gun, who actually used the object for the sexual abuse. And I think that varies in degree, and also who developed the concept of the cover-up and who was more active in that respect, as opposed to who was just present and kind of going along. They're all culpable. However, there are different degrees of culpability based on what they did.
And the legal team representing the victims, that being Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker, they said they had a nickname for Christian Dedman, calling him Officer Dead Lee. He also conducted the sexual assaults. But what does this case show us? How much does it highlight just this larger issue within police departments of turning a blind eye to police brutality? When one of the men was speaking in the courtroom yesterday, he was in tears, saying that he hopes the sentence brings some sense of closure for the victims and that he should have stood up and he was a coward. But what's the reality?
Well, the first reality is that in cases like this, this is reminiscent to, for instance, the incident with George Floyd, the heinous murder of George Floyd. These actions, these activities were known to the police department. We often see that these police officers are the group of, when they're acting in a group, they have some type of nickname, such as Goon Squad. Other people within the department knew that this person or persons tend to be heavy-handed, tend to abuse their authority, tend to abuse force. So this is nothing new. It's not like in most cases where these police officers wake up in the morning and turn from this law-abiding citizen to this outrageously mean person. So that's the first thing that stands out. And then the second, then, of course, that leads to the second point of accountability. What do police departments do when they learn of an individual who operates outside the bounds of law? Do they do nothing, or do they take action? When police departments fail to take action, that tends to send a signal to other officers: let me keep my mouth shut, let me go along. Clearly, the department has no problem with this type of activity. So it has to start from the top. And then finally, it's absolutely fascinating that 6 police officers can operate outside the bounds of law, be unaccountable, no one knows where they are. They can commit all these heinous acts without anyone looking for them. So the police department there is broken, plain and simple.
What advice do you give people? Because people watch this with two sentiments. On one hand, they're relieved to see justice being done. On the other hand, to your point about leadership, Sheriff Brian Bailey is still in his post there in Rankin County. The victims and their legal reps are filing a lawsuit, hundreds of millions of dollars. They want him out of the post. But what advice would you give to communities who care about safety? And as you say, leadership starts at the top. So how should they approach the next few months and weeks?
Well, it certainly illustrates that we shouldn't have to, meaning the public, shouldn't have to wait until there is some heinous act committed in order to take some type of corrective action. The sheriff, I'm certain, has lost confidence of the civilian population there and should be removed, plain and simple. As far as recourse, I think the only recourse when you have a system that is broken would be to through the federal authorities, the Justice Department and the FBI and so forth, unfortunately. In a larger jurisdiction, I think it's easier to seek some type of recourse through state measures because you have so many different entities and they're staffed by so many different people. But the problem is in a small jurisdiction, prosecutors and the local law enforcement authorities tend to work together. So it's very difficult to seek relief unless one goes to the federal authorities. This is just illustrative, really, of how we need some type of national standard, some type of national metric, some way, as you put it, for the civilian population to seek recourse rather than waiting for something like this to happen, to occur. Because there have been complaints here in this police department between the sheriff's treatment of the African-American community there.
And none of this would have come to light if the victims didn't speak out. If Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker, despite the humiliation and the embarrassment and the pain, if they didn't open up and share what happened, justice would not have been done. Kurt Buckhalter, thanks for joining us today on this topic. We appreciate it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I wanted to start it out with that newscast, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about this case, this story. Good riddance, okay? Good riddance to all of them. They all deserved a life sentence in prison. Screw the 17 years. Screw that. Let me give you a little bit more detail about what happened. All right. And let's not forget what wasn't mentioned in that newscast is that one of these men that they assaulted was shot in the mouth because they tried to stage a crime. Not to mention, 3 of them were convicted of another incident that occurred back in 2022. That has nothing to do with this particular case that has gotten all of this media attention. But I'm going to start off by saying, fuck them, okay? And that they deserved life in prison, period. They could have got the death penalty. But you guys know that we're talking about Mississippi here. These men operated this goon squad without any repercussions for many, many years. And they're honestly, every single case that they have ever touched should be reevaluated. They have planted evidence on people. Every case that these men have ever touched should be re-evaluating. So now that sentencing has concluded for these uncivilized mutts, as Willie T would say, he's the one that coined the term, so I give all the credit to him. But sentencing now is concluded for these 6 white former officers in Mississippi who pled guilty to breaking into a home without a warrant and torturing these 2 men. High-ranking former deputy Brett McAlpin, age 53, was the 5th former law enforcement that also received a sentence. I wanted to highlight him. 53. How many years has he been torturing Black people, Hispanic people, white people, and people of other cultures with his baton and his taser and his gun in his mouth? Oh, and they pled guilty, all right. They listen, we're talking about beatings. repeated use of stun guns, and assaults with sex toys. Okay? Now, this isn't the only time that they assaulted people with guns and sex toys and beat them. Now, in this incident that happened, the one they're being convicted of that we're all hearing about, again, don't forget, 3 of them were convicted of another case as well during this, but that just didn't get as much media attention. All right. But one of the victims was shot in his mouth to stage the crime. The final member, the 6th member, he got his sentence today. 32-year-old former Richland police officer Joshua Hartfield, he got a 10-year sentence. Ain't that nice? Must be nice. You know, they're killing us and they're torturing us and they get 10 years. But if that would have been any one of us, we'd be sitting in a prison for the rest of our lives. Now, before the sentencing, McAlpin, the 53-year-old, he apologized to Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker, but, fuck his apology, frankly. This is what he said, quote, "This was all wrong, very wrong. It's not how people should treat each other, and even more so, it's not how law enforcement should treat people. I'm really sorry for being a part of something that made law enforcement look so bad. Listen, law enforcement already looks bad. How about yourself? How about the fact that you participated in the beating, okay, the torture, and the sexual assault of these 2 men? And again, these ain't the only men they've did it to. Now, 4 other former law enforcement officers that were involved in the attack, they have also been sentenced. Christian Dedman, who I hear is the worst of the bunch, was sentenced to 40 years in prison for his role in the attack. Christian Dedman is the guy down at the bottom in the middle. Okay? They say he is very sadistic. And he's very, very sadistic. Very, very sadistic. And once officers became a member of this so-called Goon squad, they immediately began to indoctrinate these officers. Basically, this Goon squad committed police brutality against numerous people and the goal was to cover for each other and never tell, right? Oh, yeah. Now, Dedman, the real sadistic one, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison for his role in the attack and another incident that happened back in December of 2022. Hunter Elward, he was sentenced to over 20 years in prison, and 2 other officers, Jeffrey Middleton and Daniel Opdyke, was sentenced to 17.5 years in prison each. And they was trying to give Daniel Opdyke, they were trying to give him a little bit of credit, y'all. They said, he turned over the text messages and he was the one that really helped us take the rest of these guys down. He also stuck a sex toy in the mouth of one of these victims. Fuck him. For each of the deputies that have been sentenced so far, okay, Lee has handed down prison terms near the top of the sentencing guidelines. That's the judge. Judge Lee had previously called the officers' actions egregious and despicable. The attack involved beatings, repeated use of stun guns, and assaults with a sex toy before one of the victims was shot in the mouth in a mock execution gone awry. They meant to kill that man. Why were they not convicted of attempted murder is my question. But no. They came up with some other bullshit charge. Now, this terror and these terrorists began this assault on January the 24th, 2023. Okay? With a racist call for extrajudicial violence. The terror began January 24th, 2023, with a racist call for extrajudicial violence when a white person in Rankin County complained to McAlpin that 2 black men were staying with a white woman at a house in Braxton, Mississippi. McAlpin told Dedman, who texted a group of white deputies asking if they were, quote, available for a mission. This is in their this was in their WhatsApp text messages. All right. So again, McAlpin, one of the officers, told Dedman, and Dedman's the one who sent out the text. He's the real sicko of the bunch from what I hear, and asked him, hey, are y'all available for a mission? No bad mugshots, he continued to text, which is a green light, according to prosecutors, to use excessive force on parts of the body that wouldn't appear in the booking photo. Dedman also brought Hartfield, who was instructed to cover the back door of the property during their illegal entry. Once inside, the officers mocked the victims with racial slurs and then began to shock them with stun guns. They handcuffed them, poured milk on them, alcohol on them, chocolate syrup on their faces. Dedman and Opdyke, the one that, here's all the text messages. Please give me a lighter sentence, I beg you. Assaulted them with a sex toy. Yeah, the one that begged for the lighter sentence and got it, he's the one that put a sex toy in one of these victims' mouth. Then they forced them to strip naked and shower together. Okay? And then another officer, Hartfield, he guarded the bathroom door just to make sure that the men could not escape. Now, then Elward shoots Mr. Jenkins in his mouth, lacerated his tongue, and broke his jaw. He has a huge scar on the side of his neck. They devised a cover-up. Former crooked officer McAlpin pressured Parker, one of the other ones, to go along with it, asking him to keep quiet in exchange for his freedom, right? I'm sorry, that was one of the victims, told him, be quiet for your freedom. The deputies agreed to plant drugs and false charges, actually stood against Jenkins and Parker for months. They illegally bust into their home, torture them, shoots one of them in the mouth, tries to kill him in a mock execution gone awry, and sticks sex toys in their mouth. And guess what, guys? They've also taken sex toys and sexually assaulted people in their feminine and genital areas. Oh, yeah. But yet, charges stood against these 2 men for months. McAlpin and Middleton, the oldest men of this Goon squad group, threatened to kill the other officers if they spoke up. But ask me if I care about that, because I don't. I don't care. The majority of white Rankin County is just east of Jackson, Mississippi, home to one of the highest percentages of black residents of any major U.S. city. The officers shouted at Jenkins and Parker to, quote, stay out of Rankin County and go back to Jackson or their side of the Pearl River. This is according to court documents. Now, Opdyke, the one that got the light sentence because, he told it, he was the first to admit what they did. His attorney, Jeff Reynolds, said on April the 12th that Opdyke showed investigators a WhatsApp text thread where the officers discussed their plan and what happened that night. And then, of course, his attorney says, had he thrown his phone in a river, as some of the other officers did, investigators might not have discovered the encrypted messages. Again, ask me, do I care? He should have got 40 years too. Actually, they all should have got a life sentence. The charge that they had, they could have got death. I'm trying to understand why that wasn't on the table. I'm so sick and tired of these crooked cops getting away with murdering people like this. We sat there and watched Derek Chauvin sit on George Floyd for 9 damn minutes, even though people begged him to stop. Attorneys for several of the deputies said their clients became ensnared in a culture of corruption that was not only permitted but encouraged by leaders within the sheriff's office. Well, then tell me, are those leaders still there? And if so, why? Rankin County Sheriff Brian Bailey, who took office back in 2012, revealed no details about his deputies' actions when he announced that they had been fired last June. After they pled guilty in August, Bailey said the officers had gone rogue and he promised changes. My question is, Brian Bailey, why the fuck are you still the sheriff of Rankin County? And then what's cold about it, right? They'll do these sorts of things, get fired from one police organization, then they go to the next racist one. Every single police organization in this country has been infiltrated by white supremacists. And I shouldn't even use the word supremacists because that almost alludes as if they're supreme. They're not supreme to nothing. They're garbage. They're trash. Period. I should say infiltrated by white racists. You know, KKK. The ones that like to wear hoods on their heads because they're too afraid and scared to show their faces. But this dude, Brian Bailey's like, oh yeah, they went rogue. And he promised these changes. But here's the problem. Nothing ever changes. Now, the victims, Jenkins and Parker, both called for his resignation. They filed a $400 million civil lawsuit against the department. And guess what? Last November, Sheriff Brian Bailey, he got reelected without a single bit of opposition for another 4-year term. And you know why part of that is? Because people don't get out there and vote. Listen, it ain't just about getting out there and voting for your local government, for your president. You have local government you need to be out there voting for. This man overseeing these officers operated like this for years. You think that he really didn't know about it? Really? Nah, I don't believe that for a second. He knew what these guys were up to. They talk, gossip, travels fast. It travels very, very, very fast. So now that all of them have been sentenced, some of them may see the light of day before they die. And guess what? They could easily in 17 years, there are police agencies in this country that will turn around and hire them. This isn't just your normal stand of the mill, they just slapped someone. Nah, man. No. Straight torture. They were abused. This was extrajudicial violence. This was absolute torture. And it's one of the worst cases of police brutality that I have ever seen in my life. And then this piece of shit, Brian Bailey, he argues that Jenkins and Parker, the $400 million lawsuit that they filed against him, should be dismissed because he says the sheriff is entitled to qualified immunity, which is a legal concept that often shields police officers from civil penalties for alleged abuses. But here's something I've been saying, and I've been saying it and saying it and saying it for years. When these weirdos, okay, I know not all cops are bad, but most of y'all are. Most of you are. And if you haven't did the bad things that some of these others do, in my opinion, you're just as guilty as them because you know what's going on in your police department and you do nothing and you still work. You still work there. If you're working at a police agency where you know they're abusing the civilian population, Why are you backing it? Why are you backing the blue is my question. Fuck the blue. That's how I feel about it. And I have absolutely no I don't feel bad about saying it at all. At all. I wonder what KKK meetings they went to each Friday and Saturday night with their hoods and stuff. I wonder if they danced around burning crosses. Uh-huh. The Goon Squad? Really? Disgusting. I hope they break them down. I hope that Jenkins and Parker completely bankrupts that entire fucking state, county. I really do. I want them to bankrupt them. Fuck a settlement. You just gonna burst up in someone's house without a warrant just because someone called up one of the deputies and was complaining about two black men that were staying with a white woman. You don't know what they had going on. They could have had one of those relationships. What do they call it? Polyamorous. You don't know. But then you all, what's so cold about it? While they was assaulting them with the stun guns and the sex toys and other objects, these guys were handcuffed. 90 minutes this went on. And then Hunter Elward shoots Mr. Jenkins in the mouth, trying to kill him. And these officers devised this cover up. And after he shot him in the mouth, they planted drugs and a gun, which is what led to the false charges that stood against both of them for months and could have sent one of them to prison for years. And they held their secret. They held their secret for months. For months until Opdyke started getting scared. Oh, he got you know why he told it? Because he was afraid that one of them, the sadistic one, was going to kill him. That's why he told it. And the only reason they called themselves and nicknamed themselves the Goon Squad is because of their willingness to use excessive force and then cover up those attacks. And let me tell you this. In March, the Associated Press did an investigation that linked some of these deputies to at least 4 violent encounters with black men since 2019 that left 2 dead and another with long-lasting injuries. One of those men was Pierre Woods, who was shot and killed by Rankin County deputies in 2019. Family members sued that piece of shit Sheriff Brian Bailey over Wood's death. And court records show that a settlement agreement for an undisclosed amount had been reached. But I'm going to tell you now, I think some of y'all settle way too quick with these government agencies. No, I'm going to bankrupt you. And check this out. At least 2 of the deputies who shot Woods, Elward and Brett McAlpin, the same ones that were involved in this incident that happened that they're now going to prison for. How many others have they planted evidence on? How many others have they beat? How many others have they tortured and killed? For months, that piece of shit Sheriff Brian Bailey, he said nothing until after these crooked ass cops pled guilty to civil rights charges. And that's when all of a sudden he started making these promises. Oh, I promise I'm going to change things. I'm going to change the department. And you know what's so cold about it? One of these 6 officers, the Hartfield is who I'm about to tell you about. He was off duty when this happened. He wasn't even on duty. But he wanted to get involved in the fun. He wanted to be a part of it. He wasn't even on duty. He gets he gets this text. Y'all want to do a mission? How much money have you stolen from people? Drug dealers doors that you kicked in that we don't even know nothing about. There's things we don't know, guys. Believe that. Now, these state charges, the time that they got from them will run concurrently with the federal sentences that they received. Not consecutively. Why not? I don't think they deserve to ever get out of prison. I am so sick and tired of these crooked cops getting away with murder and mayhem. And then you wonder why. People like Gavin and Micah did what they did. You know who Gavin and Micah is. Some would refer to both of them as martyrs. Don't get mad at me. I'm just telling you what I know. People are tired of these crooked ass cops harassing us, okay? Harassing people. The job or the badge of being a police officer is not a job to be proud of anymore in America. Oh, Mom, I'm going to be a cop. Mom, I'm going to be a police officer. Excuse me? Number one, I would never want any of my children to be a police officer of any kind. No, number one. And number two, there's nothing to be proud of, in my opinion. I'm not, I'm a cop now. Good for you. Now you have become the enemy. That's how people look at it. There's too many crooked cops roaming these streets of America. And the government's doing nothing about it. The local governments are doing nothing about it. And look, even the sheriffs that are in charge of these crooked ass cops still manage to get reelected for 4-year terms. And then you wonder why people like Gavin and Micah go the fuck off and start killing police officers. Don't get mad at me for speaking the truth. I didn't say it was right either. I'm telling you why it's happening. You all, I appreciate each and every one of you for coming through. I'm not even going to be here that long. This story really just really angers me. And, but I felt it important to bring the so-called resolution or their sentencing information to you all, because I covered this story when it happened. You're more than welcome to go back and search Goon Squad, Leak You or whatever, and you'll find my previous video on this. When I did my previous video on this, one of the victims still had bandages all over his face. And then the audacity that you all did that to him, to both of them. And then you plant drugs and guns on them to put them in prison. How many more innocent people are sitting in prison because of these bastards? Again, Brian Bailey, is there any independent investigation going on that is looking at each and every single case that these bastards ever touched? Anyone they ever arrested, any case they ever testified in, any case that they was ever involved in should be reevaluated by an independent auditor, someone that you don't know, nobody over there in your part of the neck of the woods knows. It needs to be independent. And I bet you $1 million there's way more. Again, you did hear me, right? 2 of these assholes have already killed somebody and managed to stay on the force, and then turned around and did this to Parker and Jenkins after they had already took the life of Pierre Woods. By Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music.
Please hit the like. Thank you.
And then they get sentenced and they get the break of, oh yeah, your sentences, they're going to run concurrently. Yeah. That way we make sure that you get out, on parole. We know you got 17 years, but you'll be out in 8. Mm-hmm. God. Listen, I appreciate each and every one of you for coming through. And I do appreciate you all. But I will be back tomorrow, and we will be covering a very I've got some things. I'm not even going to go into what I'm going to be covering. Set your notification bells. I will be back this time tomorrow, and we will be covering something that, much lighter than this. But again, I will always cover police brutality. And I will always shine a light to it. So if there's a case that you are aware of, someone sitting in prison that shouldn't be, and you want to get that story out, please hit me at tips@LeakYou.com. I've done several stories based on tips that I've received from people over the years. And, I find enjoyment in exposing crooked cops. And look at them. Just look at them. They're evil, demonic bastards. But yet they run around with their control issues trying to police us. But they're the evil ones. They're the ones that should be in prison. Doesn't he look like the guy from Pawn Stars? The one in the bottom middle, though, Dr. Bombay, he's the worst one of all. He's the real sadistic one. He's the one that likes to, play with sex toys and sexually assault people with sex toys. It's insane. It is insane. And these people have been walking around. This goon squad has been around for years in Rankin County. You can't tell me asshole Brian Bailey, the so-called sheriff, doesn't know about it. You should have retired, asshole. And you're a straight up prick. And no, I don't give a damn about monetizing this video. This is to get in y'all's asses. Brian Bailey is a failure. You are a failure, sir. And you should be in jail right along with your deputies. And I won't call you sir. Until next time, folks.
The judgment sentence that you are an asshole. The trial is over. Thank you, everybody.
Let's play a game. You have 10 seconds to take all your stuff and get out of my life. 10, 9, 8.
God bless you, motherfucker.
You're really smart. Like really, really, really smart like I am.